I got lost in technology way too many years ago.
I walked up the stairs in my office twice.
This generation for technology just passed me by.
I just ran through.
Call the meeting back to order. Last couple of agenda items. Next item is JI, the committee reports.
Yes, these in the new agenda format for committee reports are collapsed into this one item. Attached items that have been presented to me by two people. One, Mr. Connick, serving as chair of the Planning Commission, including his monthly report, which last month at this time the board asked me to include on the agenda going forward, and a number of other items that the Planning Commission is working on. In addition, there's an item from the Broadband Committee, a summary of a presentation from Mr. Jimmy Carr that was prepared by Ms. Bond, reviewed by committee members. It's a very good review of I guess the laws of physics and the laws of finance, and they govern what can and can't and what likely and will unlikely occur. Beyond that, we've open to committee members to respond to the report.
I thought Jimmy did a very good job of setting the bar of what expectations can and not necessarily will be, but I think grounded everybody as much as possible. The one thing I want to do is make sure everybody knows that on March 9th, I believe, at 6 p.m. at the library, we will also have a presentation by Piedmont Broadband. They're going to bring us up to date on what they're doing in Rappahannock County and the growth that they are expecting. And we're just trying to understand what is available to us today, and that will give us an idea as a committee of what we need to do moving forward.
And what time is that?
It's at 6 p.m. at the library, 800.
Sounds like it could be a crowded meeting.
Could be.
Thank you. That, I thought that was, I didn't stay for the whole presentation, but I was there for the TF of the presentation. I thought it seemed very well done. I was at the committee meeting, just to dovetail onto the broadband committee discussion, and Margaret Bond joined us at the Rules Committee meeting and was very helpful to bring forward some structure suggestions for the broadband committee. And I do expect that the Rules Committee should be able to work through those recommendations for structure of that committee and term limits and things like that. Probably at the next meeting with everything we were able to get through.
Yeah, we anticipate that's pretty good.
I think I left homework, which we'll work on.
To this courtroom and who can use this courtroom.
This month it's, sorry, I'm not.
23rd, I think, right?
It's, well, we moved it to accommodate everyone's schedule, but it's 23rd or 24th. What did we decide? 23rd.
23rd.
At the Visitor Center, 9:30. We're going through, there was some revisions that needed to be made to it, and I think Mr. Curry wanted to have a little bit of review time on those as well, but we're reviewing the report from Wiley Wilson on the use of the buildings, the
Facility condition and space use. I received that back from Wiley Wilson, so it does have a final stamp on it, and I'll attach it to the building committee agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. And we got into a pretty good in-depth study about, particularly this building, the envelope and how we're going to go about working forward on it. We have quite a few things that we need to do with this building in particular.
My idea for the building committee, I know you all have a lot of work to do working through this report, and certainly referring it down to you all to work on, I think is a way to get the ball rolling. I would hope after we get through the budget session, May, that we could start having work sessions as a board to pick up where the building committee was left off, or to bring forward building committee recommendations and work through them in a work session environment as a board.
Good idea.
I don't think these meetings are conducive to doing that, but I think we need to do that kind of thing if we're going to get through all this material.
That's not a bad idea. If the building committee continues to meet the third Monday, that might be a problem because the board way on back was Mr. Lisinski's idea, and we never got any traction on it, but he had recommended it, and the board okayed it, but we just never did anything. It was to use the third Monday for work sessions as the workload was required. So we may have to identify another day that the building committee would meet so that our report could be forwarded to this body.
Well, it depends on the time of day and everything.
Right.
Mr. Vaughn will attend the next building committee meeting to work out phase 2 scope. What's next for the Wiley Wilson?
That was very good. Thank you both.
Yeah, it would be great because if, as it is right now, at best we're a month apart, making recommendations, and then this board has to look at it and decide what it wants to do. And if we had about $300,000 or $400,000 in the building maintenance fund to work with, we could really spend it fast.
Yeah.
I bet.
If this board wanted to, get to work on some of those projects.
Well, I think there's critical projects that need to be done. It's just a matter of making a list of priorities and starting to do them.
But I want to thank Mr. Delaney for his work on the committee. He really brings a lot of energy and good ideas, so thank you for that.
I was going to put it in for a raise.
Yeah.
All the building committee members need a raise.
You're not. That's called double dipping.
Yeah, we're not going to allow any double dipping.
Is there a report from the Facilities Authority?
Sure, yeah. I was hoping Ms. Walsh was going to stick around because I was simply going to have her do it, but that's okay. I want to, first of all, just thank young man Ben Giles, who's a grandson of Pat and Skippy Giles, and the son of Kenny Giles. As an Eagle Scout project, he constructed a great fence here at the basketball court, so balls no longer roll down a huge embankment into the Rush River, which is a third of a mile away. And so I think it's inspired me to go shoot buckets now. But I want to thank Ben for that, and also for all the parents and other Eagle Scouts who stepped up and helped him complete that project. He's a great young man. He really did a good job. And if you want to see a well-built fence, go look at it. It's great. Volunteers got together, I think last weekend, and did a Bluebird Trail, a 5-house Bluebird Trail, which is great. It's something they've been planning a long time. There's a major tree planting project underway with, I want to say dozens, if not hundreds, of holes already dug, thanks to, in part, to the regional jail inmates who continue to contribute a ton of labor hours there at the park. So again, we should acknowledge their contribution. It's really been super. There are many upcoming events, some related to Earth Day. There'll be Free Fishing Day, Dark Skies events, etc. and the Park Authority keeps most of that on their website and also on the Facebook feed. So I just encourage the public to look there for updates on events. And the one thing for this board to keep in mind is there will be coming to us, and it's already been submitted to Mr. Curry, a relatively significant budget request related to the, I think I've hinted at this previously, the construction of a ADA accessible restroom. So that we'll be seeing that in this budget cycle review. And that's just a very quick summary, but it's an extremely active board, and I hope Mr. Yell will enjoy being a part of it. And thank you for stepping up.
Thank you.
He's already got some great ideas he's been talking about.
Okay, good.
I don't know about that.
Rules Committee, I think we've heard a few things that the Rules Committee worked on. I think that was about it for what we touched on at the meeting, and at the Public Safety Committee meeting. I mean, obviously, a few of those things were brought forward already today. Did you have anything to add, Mr. Frazier?
Not really. I think you've touched on everything that I think needs to be aired, and I'd rather not talk a whole lot.
And then the Planning Commission, we've done quite a bit of work on what was going on at that last meeting. Then we have the 3 public hearings this evening. So, and I guess we'll hear the Miller application next month. All right, that takes us to treasurer's reports.
Treasurer's reports are incorporated into the meeting agenda package. Everything looks pretty good. Happy to answer your questions.
I just had, I mentioned to Ms. Smith in our conversation this morning, I'd asked you, there was one item in the expenditure detail that if anyone in the public pays attention to these reports, they'll see like a 23,000% increase.
They're running a little over.
Yeah, a personnel line item, sheriff's department. You explained it to me well, and what the correction would be in the future to avoid those kinds of numbers. Maybe you just quickly mention that.
Yeah, the salary structure within the sheriff's office, there are several budget lines. We budget to only a couple of them, but the expenses get spread out over a number based on holiday wages, longevity incentive plan, salary supplement. But when you roll all those up and give a complete budget number and a complete actual expenditure to date, you land at 64.88%, which is right where it's supposed to be.
Right. Okay.
The reason it's 23,000% is because one of the supplemental appropriations that went in for, I think, support for training hit that one budget line, so it's got a budget of $848. Probably should have gone to a different line. So, but the expense is $199,000, so that shows it being way over.
Okay. Well, thanks for
But
doing
it was
that.
offset by a supplemental appropriation.
Okay. That was my only question.
Okay. Takes us to item J3, the review of legal matters.
Yes, I've updated the information the best I know it in the packet. Obviously, the most recent Bragg one is under advisement by the judge, and I haven't heard anything more. Capielli, you'll hear about the public hearing for a special exception tonight. They will be back in General District Court on March 10th, and then they'll be in Circuit Court in April. Those court dates will be largely influenced by what happens by the board tonight.
And then I did ask for the addition of the general court matter in regards to the McCarthy recent court case. I did ask that that be added to this tonight because so that we could have a summary on that as well. And I have talked to the special investigator, Mr. Walther, on 2 different, I talked to him on one occasion, I emailed him on one occasion. The news broke about the end of the investigation on a Friday, and I called Mr. Walther's office on that Monday, and he returned my call on Tuesday. And at that time, I didn't see any way forward for the board to take a role in any of what was unfolding. there wasn't a clear role. And there's also, because it fell on the week before Lee Jackson Day and Martin Luther King Day, it was a short work week. And so if we had called a special meeting on Tuesday, we wouldn't have met the requirements for notice. And then the court date was the following Tuesday. And so there was no real way to have a meeting in regards to this matter during that time frame. We then looked at it last month as a possible item for a closed session. If it were to fall under any of the legal ways we could have this discussion, and please correct me if I say anything wrong, Mr. Goff. But there was not a way for us to go into closed session regarding any of this, because it was not something that we needed to discuss in private in a way that would affect us as a public body negatively. There was not a way to undertake this discussion in a closed session. And so I reached out to Mr. Walther a second time, realizing the first time I talked to him, he offered to speak to us as a board. I also believed at that time, as a result of that conversation, that the items from his investigation would be FOIA-able when everything was completed. But of course that was sealed. So I reached back to Mr. Walther to see if there would be a way forward, since we could not have a closed session, if there would be a way that we could engage with me, one other member of the board, possibly the county administrator, county attorney, and the county treasurer, since she first brought the concerns regarding these expenditures to his attention. I wanted to make sure as a board that we understood what had happened, understood the resolution, and most importantly, that we understood if there were any lapses in information that might make us to make different decisions as a board in terms of policy, how we did things. I don't want to, get 2 years down the road and think we should have asked more questions about what happened at that time. So that's been my way forward with this, and there hasn't been a way to really talk about it in the meeting constructively. I just wanted to update everybody on what's been going on with that. I did talk to Mr. Goff this morning, and I do think it would be beneficial as a board to have the information from the state police investigation available to us. And to that end, Mr. Goff did indicate he would be willing to draft a FOIA request to the Virginia State Police that I, as the chair, could then submit for results of that investigation. That material should be FOIA-able. That was a lot of information.
What
I'm
is the
sorry.
purpose? What is the purpose of pursuing this?
To me, when I got to, the investigation wrapped very, sort of suddenly to me. We didn't have a lot of heads up that it was wrapping. There was no way for us to have a discussion with the investigator prior to the court date. I just want to make sure that in terms of the changes that we've made with our credit card policy, things like that the changes that we've made have been adequate to address the concerns that the investigation may have raised.
So it's all about our credit card policy.
Well, that and just other policies that may be affected too. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know what the investigation found out. And the investigator's file has been sealed. And there's no way to access that.
Well, I've had some citizen complaints, requests. I've got a few questions on my own, like whether everything is actually reimbursed. We don't know that, because we've had such limited involvement. And then Mr. Goff has had to recuse himself in it. So I don't even know how he would be able to draft that FOIA request if he's been recused.
I think that the FOIA request is, to me, a different action. It's not action that's is investigating. It's just requesting information as an agent of the board. And I think that enables him to draft the FOIA request. But I pursued and asked questions because I do think it is important that we find out, what we can and make sure we are being diligent stewards of taxpayers' money. That's the only end to which I'm pursuing this question.
I think we have a definite requirement to check into that.
I don't know, it just seemed like it's been through the legal process and exposed, and I don't see any real advantage to reletting it. The state police did their investigation, the court ruled. And,
we're not,
it's not like we're gonna go in and appeal the ruling. I would just assume that the Commonwealth, the investigation was thorough, the Commonwealth attorney did his job, and the judge actually did his job. And I really don't see any benefit to dragging this back out into the public.
Well, I'll make a motion to have a letter drafted for FOIA by Mr. Goff and signed by the chair and submitted to the Virginia State Police. I believe is the
Yes,
correct.
ma'am.
And you could,
Does this have to be done by a motion of the board, or is it something you just request? I don't know the answer to that.
I think the board should make an official request.
I mean, I think that I could do it as an individual. I think it carries more gravity if it comes from the board. I also think that sort of the institutional frustration of Rappahannock County has been that we haven't talked about this as a board. And so
Well,
I want
I'll
to do this
second
work
that,
as a
your
board.
motion for purpose of discussion, but I think that to the heart of what Mr. Parrish has said, normally in plea agreements, the victim is brought into the process, and the Rappahannock County taxpayer was the victim here. We represent them, and we never discussed this with anybody. We didn't, like Ms. Smith said, we didn't know it was coming down until Friday, or maybe Thursday, and there was a holiday on Friday and Monday. We had no involvement in it at all.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, Leslie Walker was quoted as saying if there was 35 possible charges, they come up with 3. And I don't know that we've had total reimbursement to the county taxpayer yet.
I presume that whatever plea agreement was made.
That's the problem. You presume, we assume, but we don't
Right,
know.
right. I mean, you were on the board when Mr. McCarthy forewent his last 2 years of pay raises, which was a whole lot more.
But it doesn't give anybody the ability to do what happened.
Anyway, we have a motion, a second. If there's further discussion,
I think it's a bad idea.
all right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay.
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 Is that 3 nays?
Yes, ma'am.
I think they send a very bad signal to other employees that have been very,
As a result of this investigation, we have already redesigned our credit card policy. So it has served that purpose. And the investigation, I think, did what, did what it did. I mean, we all
it
just were
did what it
investigating.
did. You're right there. It did what it did.
I think everybody did a good job. I don't mean to make any implications that people didn't do their jobs, that there were any problems beyond what was addressed in court. At the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know. And that's the only reason I wanted to do a FOIA request.
Well, we do know that Mr. McCarthy devoted his life to the preservation of Rappahannock County. And we do know that he got careless with that credit card, and he admitted guilt. And
With all due respect, he was an employee of the taxpayers of the county and the board of supervisors. It was our policy that we would have been implementing.
We've had the vote on this, so I don't know that it behooves any of us to discuss it any further at the vote.
Madam Chair, one thing I would say is I know that you and I had talked about possibly the two of us going and meeting with the special investigator. I don't know. I appreciate the detailed timeline you described and your efforts to set up such a meeting. I don't know if it would make any difference if if I contacted him, because I'd be willing to, I see no problem with representing this board understanding how everything transpired, and I'd be willing to do that with you, and I'd be willing to make that call to see if it's something that maybe one more person from the board calling to arrange.
If you could reach out to him, I think that might be beneficial. That's ultimately, when we first made contact, it was because I think he had heard from multiple folks on the board. I think that's still a very beneficial conversation to have.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you joining the chair and asking for something is somehow more beneficial than the board requesting something through forward. I don't understand it. Could you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, my explanation is in line with Mr. Parrish's, which is, I think, is a very, from you had a special investigator in Culpeper County, you had the legal process run its course, and you had a judge make a determination. And I think that I respect that process. And for me, the only missing piece is just to understand how the resolution or the determination that the special prosecutor reached in terms of plea bargaining came to pass. And
I think that's what the chairman said requested.
I think we could understand that well through a conversation with him, and I just think that's a reasonable and contained way to get the rest of the picture.
The chairman said that he didn't want to meet with the board.
Well,
Rather succinctly declined my invitation.
yeah, I mean, I told Ms. Smith when she brought up the idea that I'd be willing to do that, and I still am. And for me, I think that's a reasonable approach from this board to just get the rest of the picture.
But the problem is, you're saying that you and the chair go see if you can get the information instead of them officially sending it to the board in a FOIA request. I don't understand how you feel that that's any better.
To me, if I can interject, and I don't know, I would assume a FOIA request would be thousands of pages versus a sit-down conversation that could actually answer your questions versus somebody having to look through
Well,
all
as I
of those
understood
pages.
it, the request was to the Virginia State Police for their investigative file, which I think by policy that they will release. If the FOIA request is to the Commonwealth's attorney, it was the special prosecutor, he's very likely to say no, because that's an exclusion under FOIA, is the prosecutor's file. But the state police, I think, once an investigation is over, I think they do honor those FOIA requests. There's certain instances which they can claim exclusion, but most of the time I think their policy is to honor them. But that's not going to give you any window into the thinking of the prosecutor. That's just what the investigator was assembled and put into the criminal case file for presentation to the prosecutor. If you want to find out why he did what he did, I think probably the way to do that is just to ask him. Whether he wants to give you an answer or say, well, that's none of your business, that's up to him.
Right.
So
I
I
understand
think,
there was some more restitution, let's just say that. I mean, wouldn't this FOIA request be very expensive? It's a lot of pages, don't we have to pay?
I have no idea, because I did ask for a special prosecutor. My involvement was to determine whether there was merit to the criminal case and then send it on. I don't know what's in
over
that
a
case.
certain amount of money, we have to pay for it.
right, there could be costs involved. We wouldn't know till we get into it. I
They
think
would-
we've had,
they would have
I
to
think we've
alert
had a
you.
So we
vote.
had to vote, I think we should drop it.
I think we've had a vote, and we need to move on to the next agenda item, so we can all go to the spaghetti dinner. So that takes us to the update of county administrator activities.
Knowing that I stand between you and spaghetti. Very quickly, another month without any telephone complaints to our office. So I think back a year and a half, and it's a much different picture. So
I'd like to complain about my telephone service.
you know the number. We didn't make the list this month. However, if there is one next month, I might say there is. A lot of conversation about radio system earlier, and the regional system is barreling towards a cutover, and I'm gaining confidence that it will indeed happen this spring. So that is very good, and I'm doing everything I can to keep us up to speed and caught up. The electrical upgrades, which we talked about briefly, the generator is due delivery the end of this month. I have a bid on the street right now for the electrical contractor to install everything. That's posted on our website as well as on EVA, which is the state. I'm a little concerned that we won't get traction, so if you know any electrical contractors, please make sure that they are aware that this project is happening.
What's the due date?
I believe it's the 23rd or about. They will be installing owner-provided equipment, the generator, transfer switch, surge protection device. The large transfer switch, the 800 amp transfer switch, is supposed to be delivered any day now, and they're supposed to give 48 hours notice because it's 1,600 pounds. And Ricky's working to schedule somebody to help us with that. The Library Board of Trustees selected their top-ranked offer from their RFP process, which is Interos Design. Now is the task to negotiate an agreement with them. And if the Library Board can do that, that's great. We'll move on down the path with Interos, but if we can't, we'll cast them aside and move on to somebody else in that pool. Baker Tilly is working on our scope. I don't have the information yet. I expect it any time now. They did complete the study for the 3 library board employees. So that will be an input to my budget proposal. And then speaking of that, budget all the time, every day, every hour at this point for me. So if I'm not responsive, it's because I'm holed up working on budget. Thank you.
Mr. Curry and I also attended the RRRC meeting last Wednesday. It's very convenient in my office, and Mr. Curry noted if it was ever beneficial for me to attend that, only it is mostly pro forma recommended actions that I can certainly represent the county, and he could spend an afternoon in the office with more pressing matters. So if there's ever any opportunity to free up some time for him.
Madam Chair, can I? Mr. Curry, any update on Page County's vote and
Tomorrow night.
tomorrow? I know people are wondering when things are going to happen.
I have reached out to a couple of citizens just very recently. So that's probably behind where the board would want it to be.
Can we look for a further update on that on the 11th, on that agenda?
Maybe.
Okay. Thank you.
Like I said, it's budget all the time. That's all.
And then the permit, zoning administrator, and VDOT reports are all included in the packet if anyone
Correct.
has any questions. That takes us to item K1, matters presented by the board. Does anybody have anything this month?
Do you have one?
Ms. Donahue?
Although you can drive through this beautiful county, as long as you keep horizontally focused, you won't see the trash alongside our roadways. So I love our view shed, but it's time to talk trash. And I had a meeting after talking to Mr. Curry and Christine. I had a conversation with businesses of Rappahannock, and I'm very hopeful that the entire county will get on board with a cleanup. We're thinking April 15th through the 22nd, because April 22nd is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. This will be a great way to get everybody out and about to try to help, at least in your area, clean things up. I know Mr. Curry has engaged jail, and he has had cleanup thanks to Mr. Whitson's recommendation to get Flatwoods cleaned up. But they are also going to clean up other roads for us. I'm going to reach out to RLEP, Lions Club, Democrats, Republicans, Old Rag Master Naturalists, the Park, Rapp Home, Fire Halls, Sheriff's Department, Town of Little Washington, all of our schools, our churches, and hopefully Castleton Festival folks, and maybe the RIA baseball families, just a county-wide cleanup, and let's have some fun together. Hopefully I can, with businesses of Rappahannock, convince a lot of our businesses to have some sort of discount for anybody that's wearing the sticker or whatever we come up with. I know Griffin Tavern will give a 15% discount if you're out there working, and let's just make Rappahannock as beautiful as it's meant to be.
Be sure and get the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in there too.
Good. Don't believe in it.
That's about it. Can I ask a
Picked
question?
up a lot of
Yes.
trash.
We used to have a program here called Trash Free Rappahannock a long time ago, 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it was great because you could sentence somebody to community service specifically through that. If I were to work with Mr. Curry to maybe make a bag count at the dump possible, would you think that you would be in favor of presenting that to the board as something that could be part of our dump function and the function of the county employee? That they would report with their trash bags and have their hours signed off on by our dump personnel.
I think it's great.
We need some, instead of them going somewhere else to do community service, it'd be nice if they did the community service
Sure.
right
Yes.
here where they committed the
Great
crime.
idea. We'll give them a vest.
Bags.
So more to follow.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Let's go ahead then and recess until 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to do more.
Let's go back to the
I was just going to sit here and give you this. Just go.